Hey everyone, so today is going to be a video on basically how to navigate and use Canva. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Canva is just this graphic design platform that you could use to make a lot of different graphics. So that includes here, presentations, anything for social media, so Instagram posts, Facebook posts, things like that, videos, anything that you may want to use to print. So you can make stickers here even, or logos. And it's really good to use for just being able to be creative in terms of disseminating any information. So if you have an important event coming up and you want to use flyers or presentations, really being able to make sure that your work can stand out in a concise but very creative way. And so here in the Bab Lab, we make use of Canva a lot. Especially on our Instagram, you'll see as I go in later on to explain the brain bites and the literature review Instagram posts. We really like to use it to be able to connect with our community a lot more and kind of share the information that we're doing in the lab, especially through newsletters and just different posts to make our community aware of a lot of different topics and concepts that we're covering in the lab, as well as just being able to look at different literature outside of the lab and share that with our community as well, and anyone that visits our page. So Canva, if you want to go on here, you just go to canva.com. And this is our personal brain and body lab sort of Canva platform. We do not have the pro account, so that does mean that we are limited to some icons that we can use. But even in the light or free version, Canva really has a lot of different icons, a lot of different graphics and templates that you can use to really create amazing graphics and amazing designs. So we don't really need Pro to be able to do that, but later on I can also show you really quickly how you could possibly make your own icons if that is something you're interested in. So just to kind of familiarize yourself with the website, we do have this section on the left-hand side. If you click on all your designs, you'll be able to see exactly that. So you'll see all the designs that we currently have, and you can view it either as a list or you can view it as a grid. I like to leave it as a grid so I can kind of see everything in a concise way. If you go to down here where it says starred, there are certain areas within sort of this platform that you can sector off into. So for example, this is the social media related and relevant graphics. Although it has not been updated yet, I don't think, with the newer brain bites or with the literature reviews, since that's something we got back on just recently. And then things for MBB as well. So that's just kind of how you can navigate this a little bit and keep everything in an organized place. But we're just going to get right ahead and jump into it. So if you want to create a design, you just click create a design, and it already gives you sort of different suggested platforms that you could use, or different graphics that you can make for these platforms. So if you want to make a video, you could click that. If you want to make an Instagram post, as I mentioned before, logo, Instagram story, poster, or flyer, these are already pre-made sort of template sizes. Because for Instagram stories and posts, for example, it tends to be the same traditional 1080 by 1080, for example, sizes. So they're already pre-made for that purpose. But if you wanted to create your own custom size for whatever reason, you can go down here and it'll allow you to input a width and length, as well as change the dimensions for that. But again, typically we post on Instagram or we make flyers. So it's a lot easier to just click on Instagram post. And so when you do that, it's going to give you a clean sort of blank white paper to work with. And you can most definitely get started that way and just kind of make use of this blank space and let your creative juices sort of flow. But if you find it easier, and I would say that if you are new to Canva and you kind of want to figure out how to use it just in the beginning in general, I would recommend using templates. So when you're in this page, and if you go to the left-hand side, you'll see a lot of different options. So you will see templates, elements, uploads, photos, texts, and Google Drive if it is linked to your Google Drive. And so with templates, there's a lot of different templates that you can use. Similarly, as I mentioned with icons earlier, some of the templates are required that you have Pro. They require that you have Pro, so they will be locked. But there are a lot of amazing templates that you can use that don't require Pro. And so you can go to recently used if you've already used Canva. But there's also different templates that are sorted based on sort of theme. So there's a winter one, for example, COVID sort of updates for that, animated Instagram posts. So with little icons that move. And so I would encourage you to just kind of like spend some time thinking about what it is that you want to use. So for example, if I wanted to, let's say, take this one, I would click this template. And this is an example of an Instagram ad, but let's say instead of "we are live," we could put "we are recruiting." It looks a little funky, but you can go ahead and change the font, for example, by clicking up here. And there's a lot of different options. These are some that we have recently used, but if you go to the top, you'll see that they have it sort of sorted out as handwriting. So if you want something that looks similar to sort of a handwriting style, you can do that as well. And you can keep scrolling and sort of look at the different font types that interests you. And again, there's plenty different ones that you can look at as well. So let's say we wanted to sort of keep that font. Now we want to make it bigger. So you can either increase the size, decrease the size, and do different things like that. If we want to change the color, then you go to text color, and you can change the color by either clicking on this square that says add new color, and it'll give you a lot of different options and gradients that you can choose from as well. Now, something I did want to mention in the Bad Lab is that we do have our own sort of brand kit, in the sense that we have sort of pre-selected colors that we typically use here in the Bad Lab. And so those would be this blue, this pink, and this yellow. And that's sort of the theme colors that if you visit our website or Instagram page, you'll see that we have quite a bit of. And so that's just kind of convenient to have here, so that you know, for example, to make colors appropriate to sort of what corresponds with our lab theme. And so for this font specifically, you cannot bold and you cannot italicize. There are certain fonts that will let you and certain that don't, and you kind of have to explore which ones do and do not. But I'm going to take an example of one in which you can. So I guess this one you can. So you would just click bold if you want to bold it. And let me see if there's one for italic. And this one as well. So you can italicize. If you want to center it to, well, this was already centered, but you can center it. You can move it to the left side to sort of like the middle to make it line up if there's multiple bodies of text, and to the right side as well. You can also add bullet points that you can turn into numbers or just regular bullets. You can also change the letter spacing. So let's say I want the letters to be far apart. I can space that out, or the line spacing. So that would be, for example, if we have more pieces of text, it just separates the sentences. So let me try to add something like something like that. And so for line spacing, it would just move either the sentences sort of together or separate, like that. You can also add effects. So you can add shadows for purposes of this, just kind of seeing. I'm going to change the font color. You can change the effects, so you can add a shadow. and sort of offset it so that the shadow is a little bit more prominent. So I'm going to zoom in so you can kind of see that. And you can also change the color of the shadow so it won't have to necessarily match the color of the text that you have. So if you want to make it stand out a little bit, you might want to put a shadow color that's a bit darker, like this, for example. More examples of effects that you could use. You could just add different ones. So this would be sort of like a blurry shadow. And let me do one more. If you want to make it neon, you can add neon as well. Something that I think is pretty interesting and nice is you could also sort of not make it into a straight line, but rather curved. So you could click the curve option and you'll see that your text becomes curved like this. With that, you could change how curved it is and in what direction it curves. So this isn't, too curved, right? But for example, you could also do something like this. So that's just to kind of add a little bit more style to the text. And now I'm going to go into sort of, you can underline as well. You can also uppercase all the letters, so you don't have to sort of manually do it. You can just uppercase all of it all together. You can animate it. We typically, I don't think, use this if we're making Instagram posts, because then it turns the post into sort of like a video. But these are just some examples of how that would look like. And then you can preview that by clicking this play button as well. For the page itself, you can make all the elements rise like that by clicking page animations, right? So if you want to animate the text, you click text animations and that'll individually animate the text itself. If you want to animate the page, then you click page animations and that'll animate the entire page and all the elements that correspond with it. The next thing that you can do is you can also position this forward or backward. So for example, what I mean by that is, let's say this text is on top of this laptop and it's in the forward position, but for whatever reason, I don't want it to be in the forward position. I can position it backward. And so now it's behind the laptop. And so when you have a lot of different elements that you kind of want in the foreground and some that you want in the background, this is pretty helpful to use. You can also change the transparency. So if you don't want the text to be too prominent or bold and bright, you can change it to lower the transparency or increase the transparency. If you want to add a link to the piece of text, so for example, in this template, it says join the online masterclass, but if for whatever reason we want to say like join Fab Lab, right? We might go to the website, for example, copy that. And so we go back to this page, you click on the piece of text, you click the paperclip, and I'm just going to paste the website. And so now when they click on this, it should take us to the website. Now this is helpful if it is an interactive sort of graphic. So if it's one that is clickable, if we are only downloading it in terms of like a PDF or a PNG, it most likely will not be clickable on the Instagram screen, but this, for example, could be helpful in a newsletter or something that we upload to the website that can be interactive and that you can click on the different links. That's just sort of an example of what you can do with that. And then, for example, if you want to lock an element to make sure that you don't delete it or you don't move it, you would just click lock. So I can sort of move these elements, but I can't touch this. I can't move it. So again, that's sort of helpful when you have a lot of different elements and you want to make sure that you're not really messing with any other ones or interfering with anything at all. But so now we're going to go into elements themselves. So this is the nice and fun part. I personally think that you can use a lot of different icons and graphics to create your graphic and make it unique. And so, for example, if I was doing we are recruiting infographic, I would probably start by maybe changing this photo. So I could go to the website and I would, for example, I mean, I believe we have our own picture of this logo already, but I'm just gonna quickly screenshot it for the purposes of doing this a little bit quicker. And I'm gonna paste, and then I'm just gonna crop. And instead of having this picture, what this element does, this laptop element, is that it creates a space for you to input any sort of pictures you want so that it can fit the screen. And so it looks like the Brain and Body Lab is now in the laptop. And so it kind of messed up the crop size a little bit, but you could just go ahead and fix that like so. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to try to fit it, but you would probably try to crop it beforehand and have that ready. So it looks something like that, for example, let's just say. And so that would be on there. I do want to change this font a little bit, but remember I locked it, so I have to unlock it. And so now I can do everything with it. And I'm going to change the font, maybe make it a lot larger. And we can also edit this text. So we are recruiting participants for our new research study. And so let's say I want to change this background color, because again, we do have our own sort of color templates or brand. I would click on the element, go to colors, so similar to the text, and change it to blue, for example. And for this one, I would click the color and change it to pink or to yellow. And I would change this color to maybe black, so that we can see it a little bit better. And the background color, I might change to white. And I kind of feel spontaneous, and I'm gonna curve it a little bit so that I can add a little bit more flavor to it and get rid of the underline. So now we can add our elements. You can look up pretty much anything. So for example, if I want like some kids on there, look up these elements, and coincidentally, they sort of match the colors of the Bab Lab. So I think that's really cute. But you can change their outfit colors or their skin tone or whatever elements that you can by clicking on the top colors up here. But they do correspond to what colors are currently on them. So for example, the brown, which corresponds to like their hair and their pants, would change to whatever color you choose. That's just an example. Since the colors almost perfectly match, we're just going to kind of leave it there. So I might put this here or something like that. And then there are a lot of different options. So you could go to photos. When you go to photos, it'll show you actual realistic sort of stock photos that you could use to add if this is something that you want to be a little bit more professional and you want to have like actual people sort of be featured on there, you can use photos. If you want to make it again more of an infographic, more of a sort of graphic design project, you can include these icons. So there's a lot of different options here. But as I mentioned earlier, some elements are only for pro, and you'll see that as they are denoted by sort of this crown icon that says pro on it. So what happens is I click on it, and there will be this Canva watermark on it that you can't really use. And when it goes time to download it, it'll leave that watermark on there. So you can download it, but the watermark will be on there. You can also input any videos. All of these happen to be pro. So I'm going to change it really fast and do sky. And so you can like input a video. You can crop and trim if you want a particular size and length. If you want to flip it horizontally, vertically, or if you want to lower the sound if it does have sound. So that's just kind of a quick tutorial on how to input the videos. You can also input music, audio, things like that. Again, these are all pro, but some of them are not necessarily pro, so you can use them. Again, we don't typically use audio or video. I believe maybe occasionally we use photos, but we mainly just use graphics and things like that. If you want just other sort of elements, I recommend putting in scribbles, and it'll sort of give you different kinds of elements that you could use to actually design your graphic. So that aren't necessarily like kids or people or anything like that, but that'll just make your graphic pop a bit more. And so this is just me playing around with it a little bit, adding some color, and you can also look up a blob and, for example, putting that there. And as I mentioned before, you can move the kids forward. And so now they're in front of this blob. And that can just be used to make them stand out a little bit more against the similar colors. And so that's just kind of an example of what you would do in terms of getting creative. A lot of it, as you can see, is just me playing around with different elements and materials. And I think that's also the really fun part, is just being able to be creative in each individual project that you do. I will briefly show you the templates that we do have for the ongoing graphics that we make, so brain bites and the literature reviews. But in terms of other things that we do in the lab, you can feel free to just, again, start from scratch like this, start with a template and just get creative with it. So I'm just going to finish this up because I think it's kind of fun. But you can also feel free to skip this portion. So, for example, I'm just going to add a little light bulb. Sometimes it can get a little tricky to work with when there's a lot of elements involved, as I briefly mentioned earlier. If, for example, so you can see that these are two different pieces of text. If for whatever reason I wanted the light bulb, this text, and this text to be sort of grouped together, so when I move it, all of it moves together, what you can do is highlight it like this, click the three dots, and click group. And so now this is all one group. And so that kind of facilitates it in the sense that you don't have to move different elements individually, all, separately. You could just do it all at once. And if you don't want to group it, you could just click ungroup as well. So that's kind of a little tip. Okay, so now I'm going to really quickly, I do know that we have a Procreate tutorial on our YouTube. So if you want more in-depth sort of detail on how you can use Procreate, if you have Procreate, I feel like that would be definitely a little bit more helpful. But this is just kind of a quick example of what I do if, for example, I want to use an icon, but I've kind of been noticing that I've been reusing the same icons over and over, and I kind of want to make it a little bit different, or if there's an icon I want that Canva doesn't have, and normally that's totally fine. But for example, if I really, really wanted to add my own art or things like that, this is something that you can do. So this is specific to Procreate for this tutorial, but I feel like you can do this with a lot of different apps as well, like Sketchbook. So I'm currently in Procreate, and I'm just going to show you how I would make my own icon to add. So for example, there are a lot of different brush sizes that you could use here. I typically use the 6B pencil, but you could use sort of whatever it is that you want to use. You could use different ink sizes and styles, but I'm just going to use the pencil for this tutorial. And then you can also change the color here at the top right hand, and just sort of similar to Canva, change the colors that you want. I try to match it to, again, our Fab Lab brand colors. So that would be like some sort of blue like this, a pink. It doesn't have to be, specific, but I'm just going to make it very, very basic right now. So I'm going to choose this pink, and let's say I want to add hearts to this infographic that I made here. So I'm just going to create like little hearts and things like that. It's kind of all over the place. And we will say that this is good enough. And let's say I want to add like little stars. And so if I want this to sort of be an icon in itself for the infographic I just made, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click these two little squares at the top right hand corner. And instead of making the background color white, I'm going to unclick that so that it's transparent. And that is exactly how I'm going to save it, so that the background is transparent. And when I upload it to Canva, it will be also transparent. And so now I'm just going to export by going to this sort of tool icon. I'm going to export it as a PNG. And then what I do is I email it to myself. And send it. And then I open my email on my laptop or wherever I'm doing Canva. So now I opened my email, and now I'm going to save it, and the background should look like this with the little different squares. I'm just going to download it to my laptop. I'm going to go back here to Canva, and I'm going to click Uploads. So if you remember, I mentioned earlier, there's this sort of side handle that shows the templates, elements, uploads, photos, text, things like that. You click on Upload Media, you download that, you click on that, and this is your icon right here. Let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see that. So this is exactly what we made on Procreate, and I can just crop it because I don't need the whole square size. And so now I can put it anywhere. I can rotate it like that if I want to. I could also, again, minimize or decrease the transparency. So now it's more of a background than it is anything else. I can push it to the back. And so that's just kind of an example of what you could do in order to create your own icons, and really get creative with that as well. And I really like it personally because when I'm doing brain bites or biome bites and things like that, if I go to elements, I think you'll be able to see that there's only a select few graphics that are on here that, for example, aren't pro. And it's got aren't pro. Most of these are pro, and if not, I feel like I have used most of them already. And so I can show you an example of one that I made myself, just so that when we're making these different graphics, we have different icons that we can use so that we're not reusing them, and there's nothing wrong with reusing them. But if you find yourself kind of wanting to use new icons and graphics and you find that you have the time to do it and you just want to be creative, then that is totally a really good option for you to use as well. So now I'm going to go into very quickly the biome bites and the brain bites. So this is what it looks like. This is something that goes onto our Instagram story that we try to post weekly. So an example of what I did here, just kind of breaking down the elements. So this in itself was sort of a background element, and I decided to make it the background of this biome bite. As I mentioned earlier, you can add shadow to your text, and that's kind of what I did here. I also made this sort of border be a border for the text. I added a couple icons here and just pretty much kept it simple. And so that's what the bites look like. An example of one that I created through Procreate to add on to here, I think would have to be these neurons right here, as well as this gut. So as you can see, I kind of tried to incorporate my own icons into it as well, just because sometimes they are a little bit limited, or if you just feel like you want to create something new, that is a good option as well. So going back to this left-hand side, and something that I didn't mention earlier was that if you go to the text option, there are sort of other pre-made text that you can use. So it's different from changing the text or the font that I mentioned earlier, in that these are sort of more so meant to be title fonts. So they stand out a lot more and pop a lot more. For example, the sparkle one. And so if you are really trying to grab the attention of a lot of different viewers, for example, you can just click that, and you'll find that there are a lot of fonts here that are really good to grasp attention and to use as different title fonts. But I typically don't use this, and I just kind of change the font according to what it is that I am interested in for whatever infographic or design I'm making. So I think that is pretty much it in terms of how to use Canva, how to sort of personalize it if you want to create your own icons through Procreate or through any other drawing device. Again, I do believe we have a Procreate tutorial already up on our YouTube page. So if that is something that you are interested in, I would definitely recommend looking at that and trying that out. But if you do have any other questions, please feel free to let us know, and hopefully this will give you a good opportunity to kind of just explore your creative side. I do recommend that if you are using Canva or just trying to be creative in terms of graphic design, to really just play around with it, the different fonts, the different colors, see what you feel comfortable with and what you think looks good when put together. And yeah, I hope this was helpful in any way.